During this recent period of lockdown, there is one Bible passage that has kept coming into my head. But before I tell you what it is, I will tell you the sorts of things that are bringing it to mind for me. This morning, Mary put out a magazine insert into the recycling bin. It was the calendar of events that normally comes with the English Heritage magazine. There was absolutely no point in hanging on to it because not a single event in it is actually going to take place. And to my surprise, it's not even just magazines that are doing this. We know they have long lead-in times, but I found that even television advertisements have not been updated. I saw one for a particular brand of tea saying, pop round next door and make a cuppa. No, don't do it. Here's the passage, James 4:13-16. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there doing business and making money. You do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wishes it, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. It's a passage I've read often enough before in the past, but if it has ever struck me at all, it has been to think, oh, come on, James, stop being such a zealot. Of course we make our plans. It would be impractical not to. Of course we don't interrupt our conversation every time we use the future tense to say, if the Lord wills it. And I do actually generally know what tomorrow will bring. I have a diary to tell me. To be sure, there are occasions when my diary fails to materialise, but they're generally fairly minor, with minimum impact even on myself, let alone on the wider world. As a church, if anything, we tend to encourage that sense of we know what tomorrow will bring. We have our recurring church calendar to tell us what will happen at each Sunday service, our recurring festivals to give a set rhythm to the year. Tradition is part of our culture. We know that at a particular festival, we always do this at St. So-and-so's. Occasionally, of course, all of us do get surprises when our lives are suddenly and radically changed by a particular circumstance. I suppose for me, the biggest challenge to my expectations that life would follow a predictable plan was the failure of my first marriage. I'd taken it for granted that the woman I married when I was 26 would remain my wife until death us did part. And that isn't what happened. And that shock to all I took for granted was as life-changing as the actual circumstances of the event itself, even if it was followed by other, more positive unexpectednesses when I met Mary. And I'm sure others of you will have had experiences that have similarly changed your whole life and shaken your whole being, whether for good or for bad. Perhaps bereavement, especially, is sudden and unexpected. The arrival of children causes a complete change in life and expectation. Even so, compared to the days of St. James, such life-changing events are probably rarer. We have not obliterated death, but modern medicine means that it is increasingly confined to old age, so that whilst it is still terrible, it is less unexpected. Family planning and fertility treatment mean that whilst having children unexpectedly, or indeed discovering that we're infertile, are hardly unknown in our age, childbirth is perhaps more predictable and controllable nowadays than it ever was before. Again, in such areas, the custom of the church has been almost to be a shock absorber to such life-changing events by imposing some regularity and order on them. We may not have anticipated the death of a loved one, but we know what a funeral looks like. Children may change our lives radically, but the service of baptism is one of the fixed rituals that we can control. Love may come unexpectedly, but marriage imposes a sense of order onto it. So by and large, it has been the work of the church as well as that of medical science, to prove James wrong. We have not wholly eliminated the unexpected, but we have reduced it and found ways to give order to it, even when it happens. And then this happens. It is something unprecedented in the lifetimes of most of us. My divorce may have shaken me to the core, but it did not affect very many other people. And that's true of most such life-changing events. They affect individuals deeply, but they do not affect society as a whole very greatly. During my own lifetime, there have been two truly groundbreaking events that I can identify that have changed the whole world: the fall of the Berlin Wall and the destruction of the Twin Towers. But in terms of its impact on people as a whole, what we're going through now may prove even greater. I don't know for sure yet. It's still early days. We'll have to see. But potentially, this is the most groundbreaking event since the Second World War. The plans we had made are cancelled. Today or tomorrow we will go to this or that place, we might have said. But events that were planned as recently as when English Heritage went to press are now cancelled. We're not allowed now to go to such and such a town. We are unable to do business. Few are making money. As a church, we are challenged. All our coping mechanisms, all those devices we used to impose order on the world, are denied to us. Palm Sunday and Easter this year will not be done in the way we have always done them at St. So-and-so's. Weddings and baptisms will not take place, and funerals will be simple graveside ceremonies with only a handful of close relatives in attendance. At the very time when death is on the increase, the ceremonies by which we are accustomed to draw its sting are taken away from us. But St. James, the Lord's brother, who knew all along that these things could happen, actually never relied on church ceremonies. His own life was one that took in surely the most groundbreaking event in all of history, the death and resurrection of his own brother and the formation of the Christian church. It is something that he had totally not expected. The only mention we get of him in the Gospels is as one of the members of Jesus' family, that exasperated family who tried to drag Jesus away from the crowds to get him a decent meal. Actually, Monty Python got it right. To his family, he was not the Messiah, he was just a naughty boy. But Jesus appeared to James after his resurrection, and James had to accept that all that he had believed about the world no longer held true. But he had found something to take its place: faith in Jesus, the one who had turned out to be so much more than he had imagined. We know how James would have coped with lockdown, because he had to do it. The early disciples were subject to great persecution and had to keep their heads down. The Bible doesn't record what happened to James himself. There is the death of St. James in the book of Acts, but that's a different one. James, the brother of John. This James, though, does have his death recorded by the historian Josephus, who tells us that he was put to death on the orders of the high priest in AD 62. The letter that we are reading today, the letter we have in our Bible and from which my earlier passage came, was written during those circumstances of lockdown. And this is the advice James gave to others in his situation. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Beloved, do not grumble against one another, that you may not be judged. See, the judge is standing at the doors. As an example of suffering and patience, beloved, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Indeed, we call blessed those who showed endurance. You've heard of the endurance of Job, and you have seen the purposes of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. That doesn't sound like bad advice to me. Perhaps for next week's talk, I'll try and unpack it for you. Or is that just making too many plans?